If you ask most people why some build wealth while others don't, the answers usually sound familiar. They'll say it's income, opportunity, luck, education, working harder. And sometimes those things matter. But they don't explain something that's surprisingly common. Two people can earn almost exactly the same amount of money, work similar jobs, live in the same city, and 20 years later, their financial lives look nothing alike. One has built real wealth. The other still feels like they're starting over every month. So what happened? Most people assume there must have been one big decision, one lucky investment, one perfect opportunity, one mistake that changed everything. But that's rarely how financial lives unfold. They're shaped much more quietly than that. Let's imagine someone named Oliver. Nothing about Oliver's life looks unusual. He wakes up, gets ready for work, drinks the same coffee every morning, sits in traffic, answers emails, comes home tired. From the outside, his life looks almost identical to thousands of other people around him. For years, it actually was. Oliver wasn't obsessed with money. He wasn't reading investing books every weekend. He wasn't trying to become a millionaire before 30. He simply wanted life to feel a little less stressful, a little less uncertain. Like most people, he believed that would happen naturally as he earned more. And for a while, it seemed true. His salary slowly increased. He moved into a nicer apartment, bought a better car, started eating out more often. Nothing extreme. Just small improvements that felt deserved after years of working hard. If someone had asked Oliver whether he was making good financial decisions, he would have said yes, because every decision made sense on its own. The apartment shortened his commute. The car was more reliable. The vacations helped him recharge. None of them felt irresponsible. And that's exactly why this story matters. Because the decisions that shape your financial future rarely feel dangerous while you're making them. They feel reasonable, comfortable, even smart. The real difference between people who build wealth and people who don't usually isn't one dramatic choice. It's the direction created by hundreds of ordinary ones. The difficult part is that you can't see direction in a single day. Imagine taking one step. You don't feel like you've gone anywhere. Take another. Still, nothing seems different. But keep walking in the same direction for 10 years, and you'll arrive somewhere completely different from the person who took the same number of steps, just slightly off course. Money works in much the same way. Every financial decision quietly points somewhere. Most of them don't change your life tomorrow. They simply make one future a little more likely than another. That's why wealth often feels invisible while it's being built. There's no dramatic movie scene, no sudden transformation, no moment where everything changes overnight. Instead, small choices begin stacking on top of each other, almost too slowly to notice, until one day, the gap between two people who once looked identical becomes impossible to ignore. And by then, it usually looks like luck. But it wasn't luck. It was direction. And direction is almost always quieter than people expect. I want to stay with Oliver for a moment, because what happens next in his story doesn't look like a turning point at all. There's no crisis, no dramatic financial mistake, no sudden wake-up call where everything collapses. In fact, if you were watching his life from the outside, you'd probably say things are improving. His income goes up again, not dramatically, but enough to feel it, enough to loosen the pressure a little, and that's where something subtle starts to happen. Because when most people get a little more financial breathing room, they don't feel relief in a clean, simple way. They feel permission. Permission to upgrade small parts of their life that suddenly feel reasonable. A slightly better apartment, a slightly newer car, More convenience here, less friction there, nothing extreme, nothing irresponsible on its own. That's the part nobody warns you about. The fact that most financial shifts don't feel like decisions. They feel like adjustments, like life is simply aligning itself to your new reality. Oliver doesn't think, I'm changing my financial future. He thinks, I've worked hard. I can finally afford a little better. And honestly, he's not wrong. But here's where the quiet problem starts, because every upgrade comes with something invisible attached to it. A new baseline, a new version of normal. And once something becomes normal, it stops feeling optional. Let me explain it the way it actually feels in real life. When Oliver moved into a nicer apartment, the first week felt amazing. More space, less noise, a sense of relief he didn't realize he needed. But a few months later, it wasn't nice anymore. It was just home. And anything less than that level of comfort would now feel like a step backward. That's the shift most people never notice. Life doesn't just improve when you earn more, it recalibrates. And recalibration is powerful because it's silent. There's no alarm that goes off when your spending quietly rises to match your income. There's no moment where you say, this is the point where my wealth building slows down. It just happens through repetition, one automatic upgrade at a time. And here's the psychological part that makes this so hard to see clearly. Your brain is not trying to maximize your wealth. It's trying to maximize your comfort in the present moment. That's its job. Short-term relief feels like success, even if long-term stability quietly suffers. So Oliver keeps making decisions that make perfect sense in isolation. He eats out more because he's tired. He upgrades a subscription because it saves time. He chooses convenience because his days already feel full. And each decision individually is harmless. But together they start drawing a pattern that doesn't feel like loss. It feels like progress. That's the trap. Not overspending in a dramatic way, but normalizing a lifestyle that always expands just slightly faster than your wealth does. And this is where most people get confused when they look back years later. They don't remember the accumulation, they remember the intention. I wasn't irresponsible. I didn't do anything crazy. And that's usually true. But wealth isn't lost in one big moment. It's diluted in hundreds of small ones that never felt important enough to notice. Now here's where Oliver's story starts to shift in a more important way, because something else is happening at the same time. While his spending quietly adjusts upward, his financial planning stays exactly the same. No real system changes, no structured saving increase, no deliberate separation between lifestyle and wealth building, just income in, expenses out, and whatever is left over at the end of the month, if anything is left. And that if is doing a lot of heavy lifting, because leftover money is not a strategy, it's an outcome. And outcomes are inconsistent when they depend on mood, energy, and monthly pressure. Some months Oliver saves a bit, other months life gets in the way. A car repair, a vacation that felt overdue, a few unexpected costs that don't feel unexpected at all when you're living them, and slowly, without any single decision standing out, his financial life begins to lose structure. Not collapse, just drift. And drifting is dangerous in a way most people underestimate, because drifting doesn't feel like failure, it feels like neutrality, like nothing is wrong. But direction doesn't require chaos. It only requires inconsistency. Now I want to pause here because this is the part most people miss when they think about money. They assume wealth is built through big, aggressive moves. High-risk investments, perfect timing, massive discipline. But in reality, the biggest difference between two people is often not what they do once, but what they repeat without thinking. One person builds a system where good decisions happen automatically. The other relies on willpower in moments when they're already tired, stressed, or distracted. And willpower is not a stable foundation. Oliver doesn't realize it yet, but his financial life is starting to depend more on energy than structure. And energy always fluctuates. There are days when he feels responsible and focused. And there are days when he just wants relief. And on those second days, future Oliver always loses. Not because of bad intentions, but because the present moment is always louder than the future. So what looks like normal life is actually something else entirely. A slow imbalance between comfort and consequence, between today's ease and tomorrow's options. And the most unsettling part, nothing feels broken. There's no warning sign, no obvious mistake, just a quiet distance forming between two versions of life, the one he is living and the one he assumed would naturally follow. And that gap is where everything important starts to happen, because once you see it clearly, you realize something uncomfortable. Most financial outcomes aren't decided by income. There's usually a moment in a story like Oliver's where people expect something big to happen. A breakdown, a crisis, a sudden wake-up call where everything finally makes sense in hindsight. But real life rarely gives you that kind of clarity. Instead, it gives you something quieter. A normal Tuesday, Oliver is sitting at his desk later than usual, not because something dramatic happened, but because the day just stretched longer than expected. A few meetings ran over, a few tasks got pushed back, and now he's scrolling through his bank app without really planning to. It's not even a conscious decision at first, more like checking whether you don't trust anymore. And that's when he notices it. Not a disaster, not an emergency, just a pattern. The same cycle he's seen before, repeating again. Income came in. Expenses followed faster than expected, and the gap between the two feels smaller than it should. He doesn't panic. Most people don't. Because the danger isn't loud enough to trigger panic. It's quiet enough to rationalize. You just spent a bit more this month. Things were unusual lately. Next month will be better. And maybe next month really will be better, but that's not the point. The point is that nothing is actually changing underneath the surface. And this is where something shifts in Oliver's thinking for the first time. Not emotionally, but structurally. He starts to see that his financial life isn't a reflection of how hard he works. It's a reflection of how his system behaves when he's not paying attention. And that realization hits differently than guilt or stress. Because it's not about effort, it's about design. For years, Oliver believed money was something he managed in moments of decision. But now he's starting to see it's something that manages itself in the background. Every automatic payment, every repeated habit, every small yes that never felt important enough to question. They weren't random. They were building something, and that something had direction, just not the one he assumed. This is where most people feel a subtle shift in how they see themselves. Not as someone who is bad with money, but as someone who never actually built a system for it. And that distinction matters more than people realize, because shame tells you to try harder, but understanding tells you to change structure. Oliver doesn't suddenly become disciplined overnight. That's not how behavior works, but he does start noticing friction differently. He starts to see that convenience always has a cost. It's just not always paid immediately. And for the first time, he begins to separate two things that used to feel the same. Spending because he wants something now, and spending because he never questioned whether now should always win. It sounds simple when you say it out loud, but in practice, it changes everything. Because once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. And that awareness creates a strange kind of pause. Not restriction, not sacrifice, just space. But the kind where you actually feel the weight of direction again, Oliver starts doing something small at first, not a dramatic overhaul, not a complete lifestyle reset, just a moment of separation. He begins treating his money like something that needs intention before it leaves him, not fear, not control, just intention. And at first it feels unnatural, because he's used to money flowing based on habit, not thought. But over time, something unexpected happens. He doesn't feel restricted. He feels less scattered. And that feeling is what surprises him the most, because he assumed awareness would make life heavier. But instead, it makes it clearer. And clarity changes something deeper than behavior. It changes identity. He stops seeing himself as someone reacting to life month by month, and starts seeing himself as someone shaping direction slowly over time. And that shift is subtle, but powerful, because now the question is no longer, can I afford this right now? It becomes, what kind of life am I building if this becomes my normal? And that question doesn't demand perfection. It just demands honesty. And honesty is uncomfortable in a different way than stress. It doesn't overwhelm you. It focuses you. This is the first real turning point in Oliver's financial life, not because his income changed, not because his expenses suddenly dropped, but because his awareness stopped treating every decision as isolated and started seeing them as connected, like threads in something larger, a direction that had always been forming quietly, even when he wasn't looking. And once that becomes visible, something shifts that can't easily be reversed. Because now, even ordinary decisions carry meaning again, not pressure, meaning. And that is where everything begins to open up. Not in the dramatic way people expect, but in the calm realization that he is not just living a financial life, he is building one. There's something strange that happens when people finally understand their financial life. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough at first. There's no rush of excitement, no sudden confidence spike, no dramatic everything changes today moment. It feels quieter than that. Oliver notices it on an ordinary morning. Nothing has changed on paper. His income is the same. His job is the same. His responsibilities are the same. But something inside the way he moves through those things has shifted. He's no longer just reacting to his month. He's observing it. And that distance, even if it's small, changes everything. Because for the first time, he starts to see money less like something that happens to him, and more like something that responds to him. Not instantly, not dramatically, but consistently over time. And that changes how decisions feel in the moment. He still goes to work. He still pays bills. He still lives a normal life. But now there's a pause that didn't exist before, a small interruption between impulse and action. And in that pause, something simple but powerful appears. Awareness. Not the kind that judges, the kind that clarifies. He starts noticing how many of his choices were never really decisions at all. They were defaults, patterns dressed up as preferences, convenience disguised as necessity. And once you see that clearly, it becomes harder to pretend otherwise. But here's the part that matters most. Oliver doesn't respond by trying to control everything. He doesn't build a rigid system. He doesn't suddenly become strict or extreme, because that's what people often misunderstand about change, like this. Real financial clarity doesn't push you toward control. It pulls you toward intention. And those are not the same thing. Control feels tight. Intention feels aligned. Control comes from fear of getting it wrong. Intention comes from understanding what you're actually doing. So instead of trying to fix everything at once, Oliver starts smaller than he expected. He begins by simply noticing. Before he spends, he pauses long enough to ask a quieter question. Not, can I afford this? But something more honest. What is this actually doing to my direction? And at first, that question feels almost too simple to matter. But it starts interrupting something deeper than spending. It interrupts autopilot. Because autopilot is what quietly decides most financial outcomes. Not bad choices, just unexamined ones. And the moment those choices become visible, they stop being automatic. That's where everything starts to shift. Oliver doesn't stop enjoying life. He doesn't stop buying things he likes. He doesn't suddenly disconnect from comfort or pleasure, but something fundamental changes in how those things fit into his life. They stop being invisible habits. They become deliberate trade-offs. And trade-offs, when you actually see them, carry weight. But they also carry freedom. Because now he's no longer drifting through decisions. He's choosing them. And choice changes the emotional tone of everything. Even simple things start to feel different. A purchase doesn't just disappear into the background anymore. It connects to something larger. A direction. A future version of life that is slowly being shaped, one small decision at a time. And this is where something unexpected happens. He starts feeling less anxious about money, even when nothing dramatic improves. Not because he suddenly has more of it, but because he finally understands how it behaves in his life. Uncertainty is often worse than limitation. When you don't understand your financial direction, every decision feels like it could be wrong. But when you see the pattern clearly, decisions stop feeling like traps. They become inputs, and inputs can be adjusted. That shift alone reduces more stress than most people expect, and because anxiety around money is rarely just about numbers, it's about unpredictability, about not knowing where you're actually headed. But Oliver can see the direction now. Not perfectly, not completely, but clearly enough to stop guessing. And that clarity brings something subtle but profound. He stops thinking in terms of this month and starts thinking in terms of this direction. Not obsessively, not rigidly, just naturally. Like noticing which way the current is flowing instead of fighting every wave individually. And over time, that changes his decisions without forcing them. He spends a little less where it doesn't matter to him. He keeps more of what does. He becomes slightly more intentional without feeling restricted. And the surprising part is that nothing in his life feels smaller. It actually feels more spacious. Because when you stop leaking attention into unconscious decisions, you recover something that was never visible on a bank statement. Mental space. And mental space is where long-term thinking finally becomes possible. Not because you suddenly become smarter, but because you're no longer constantly reacting. There's room to think ahead without urgency distorting everything. Oliver doesn't see it as transformation. He sees it as clarity returning, like something that was always supposed to be there, but got buried under noise. And now, slowly, that noise is fading. Not all at once, not permanently, but enough to notice a new pattern forming. A life that isn't being accidentally built anymore, but gently designed. One quiet decision at a time. And for the first time in a long time, that feels enough.